Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top-shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's C-O, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order.
There are many tales of giants throughout history, but is the army covering up the fact that they found one? Follow me down the rabbit hole about the giant of Kandahar. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we have another suggestion. We have so many suggestions, guys. So if you have written to me and you have a suggestion, if you don't hear it for a while, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I just have so many that I'm working through them. So this one came back in August, so here we are. So thank you, Graham, for suggesting this episode, and also thank you for your service. We appreciate everything that our military does and has done for us over the years. So from veteran to veteran, thank you. Let's get into it. Yeah? The story of the Giant of Kandahar was first shared on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. And if you remember, Mel's Hole was also first shared on that show. So if you haven't listened to that episode, they have nothing to do with each other. Art Bell was kind of like, I don't know, he was the conspiracy theory podcaster before podcasts were a thing. So he had this AM show basically overnight, and people would call in, they'd talk about all kinds of strange things. Unfortunately for us, I looked through all of Art Bell's like vault, and because you can go to the website, he's no longer doing the show. Somebody else is doing the show now, but they have all, like, not all of the episodes. They have a bunch of the shows that he did in this vault. Well, I could not find the episode that this was shared on because they didn't have that episode available. They have a lot. That's not one of them. Luckily for us, for the Mel's Hole episode, they had like three different recordings of like different times that Mel called in. So, but for this one, I couldn't find it. So I had to look to other sources to tell a story, which is fine. Actually, I did end up finding a YouTube video that had a man who was part of the team that actually was there when the giant was discovered and killed. So I used that as most of my research. I used other things as well, but that's kind of where most of the information for this giant came from. So, in 2002, an elite tactical team had been called into a remote part of Afghanistan. So basically another team had been on patrol in this like remote area in the mountains, and they had failed to make radio contact. I'm not sure how many times they hadn't made radio contact. It definitely seemed like it was more than once, but I don't know for sure. And that's when they sent in the Spec Ops team. I heard it was the Green Berets, although that is not confirmed. They never really confirmed like who went in or who did this or what happened. But of course they're not going to confirm it because they want to try to keep it under wraps. So the Spec Op team was flown in and then had to hike for about 4 kilometers along the path the first team had been on, because they're obviously looking for the first team. They have no idea where potentially they could be. That's when they came to a cave. Like about 4 kilometers in, they had come to this cave. And they had made note of the rocks, which seemed kind of odd. And there was like a lot of bone matter. Now, a lot of this information, like I said, came from an interview with one of the soldiers that was there. And he identifies himself only as Mr. K. so that's how I will refer to him. Mr. K said he wasn't close enough to really identify like the type of bones. And honestly, like, would he even know if they were human bones or animal bones? I don't know. I don't know his extent with bones. But he also said that they did see pieces of military communication equipment on the ground. So that's when they like instantly started thinking like something happened to this team. It was an ambush, was it animals, was it like something happened, right? He said that they were in front of the cave and they were kind of on this like ledge almost, but it was big enough that they could get into like a dispersal formation in case of an ambush, but there was like an extreme drop off on the one side. So they were in front of the cave on one side, and there was a drop off on the other side, and they were on the ledge big enough that they could get into this dispersal formation. Because they're worried, like, now they found military equipment and bones. They don't know if it's the bones of this team, but obviously something happened here. And that's when they saw it. Like this thing basically was moving at them with such speed and agility, it really caught the entire team off guard. Mr. K describes it as a man, like 12 to 15 feet tall. He had long red hair that was past his shoulders and a long red beard. And he's just like, he's running at the team. So obviously this team is like freaking out because what is this thing, right? It's huge. So he said that training basically just kicked in and they started shooting at this thing. And the giant had a spear and stabbed one of the members of the team with it. And he wasn't going to stop there. Basically, he was going to stab more members with a spear. He was going to kill the team. So that's when they started yelling, "Shoot him in the face." And he said he doesn't really understand why, but like all of a sudden it clicked for multiple people that like they need to shoot him in the face, shoot him in the head to kill him. And everyone did. Like they all trained their guns on his face and shot him. And they killed the giant. And it sounds like this kind of happened like over time, but it didn't. He said this all happened in about 30 seconds or so, that like the giant comes running, kills one of their team members, and the rest of them start shooting him in the face, and then they kill the giant. But because, unfortunately, that team member did die, the team called for a medevac because that's what you do. So the helicopter, luckily, like could come up right on the edge of the drop-off, and they dropped this big netting down, and they loaded up the giant. They also loaded up their team member that had died. And Mr. K kind of was explaining this, that when they were loading up this giant, first of all, he was really hard to move because he's huge. Secondly, he smelled awful. He said he smelled worse than a skunk. Like he was just this like wrench. He had 6 fingers and 6 toes, and his toes, like his toenails, were pointy and gross looking, as if he had some sort of like toenail fungus. And I've read several different places, and I heard from the interviewer, not the interviewee, that the giant had 2 rows of teeth. And also that I read that several places. So I'm going to assume that that was communicated at some point. I just never heard it directly from the horse's mouth. But no source really differs on that. Like everyone says the same thing, that he had red hair, that he was super tall, that he had 6 fingers and 6 toes, and he had 2 rows of teeth. So that's what we're going with. Mr. K went on to explain that in the after action report they had to write, they were being told basically to rewrite it because the military and government didn't want this to get out. So they took the giant somewhere. They took it back to the United States, I'm assuming, and nobody ever actually heard of it again. I'm assuming that they took it basically to wherever they take a lot of top secret things, probably where they keep alien corpses, and they probably did an autopsy, and they're trying to figure out like what the heck is going on. But in the same video, another man was interviewed, and he called himself Mr. D. So in this YouTube that I am referencing, it's in the show notes, as with all of my sources are always in the show notes. So Mr. D was not present during the encounter, but he was serving in Afghanistan at the same time and heard rumors of this creature. He was also Spec Ops, but like on a different team. But he actually commented on why he thought that this was covered up. He says if it points to the Bible being accurate, they want to cover it up because the interviewer kept bringing up like Bible references and the fact that like this giant could signify that the Bible's not lying to us, that this isn't some made up story. This is like real life truth. This is history. This is real. But if you're seeing this for real, they need to cover it up as much as possible. And that's why Mr. D thinks that they did cover it up. And also, I think that like the mass panic, but I think that we would get over that pretty quickly. So, I don't know. Pros and cons.
Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's CO, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order.
Mr. D says that at the time, it was common knowledge to hear the story of this giant man that was killed near a cave, and everyone was talking about it. But he said it wasn't just talked about in theater, but like when he got home, other units on the base were also talking about it, and then people that like weren't even in the theater at the time. He also said that when he was doing patrols in Afghanistan, they were told to keep their weapons high. Like normally, they're told to put 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. But after this incident, they were being told to aim straight for the head and keep their weapons high. But like higher than a man's head high, like super high. So, can you imagine like you're trained one way, now you're going out on patrols in the mountains of Afghanistan. They're like, we're no longer worried about like terrorist organizations, the Taliban. Now we're worried about giants coming at us and killing our entire team in one foul swoop. Because it seems as though that's what happened. I don't think, I mean, not that I ever found, I don't know if they ever found the team that they were out looking for. Mr. D also said that locals often talked about creatures that lived in caves and ate people that were cannibals. But at the time, like before the giant was found and killed, they thought basically like every culture has folklore. This is probably just that. So after that, they were like, maybe it's not folklore. It's kind of like us with Sasquatch or Bigfoot. We're like, yeah, Bigfoot's out there. But half of us believe it, half of us don't. It's folklore until you like actually see Bigfoot. And then you're like, maybe it's true. But so this is not the only case of giants in Afghanistan. There's actually so many more cases that I'm going to share with you because I think that it kind of all goes together. There is an Instagram page called Tales from the Grid Square where military members can write in anonymously about like not normal paranormal type things that they experience while they're serving, which I think is really cool. So I have followed them and I'm really interested. Anyway, so it is very important to those who do share that they stay anonymous. I will read you these stories, but again, they're just from anonymous sources. I have found a couple of the stories on the havocjournal.com, which is a military blog site, basically. He got permission from Tales from the Grid Square to share these stories. I'm not sharing them third hand, but I'm trying to give credit to both sites. Both sites, again, are in the show notes. If you want to go check it out, follow them on Instagram. And I'm going to read straight from the website. So, if it sounds very scripted, it's because it's literally the story that the person shared. This first story is called The Giant of Kunar. It says, I was deployed as an infantry team leader with the army in the Kunar province of Afghanistan from 2008 to 2009. One night, we set out on an observation patrol to overlook a village that we suspected IEDs were coming out of due to a successful IED recovery a few weeks prior. My lieutenant gave me a new thermal imaging system called the Recon 3 that none of us were familiar with and told me to figure out what I can and pass along the information to the other team leaders. I started messing with the Recon 3 to see its capabilities and was surprised at the clarity of the zoom on it. I spent most of my time messing with the different functionalities and watching the village. I started to look across the valley to what I could see, and that led me to look along the spur we were set in on and saw a very large heat signature at the top of one of the false peaks. I did everything I could to get as clear of an image as I could, suspecting that it was a group of Taliban huddled together around a light, as they tend to do in the mountains. All of a sudden, the heat signature stood up as one being. The trees in the area grew up about 10 to 12 feet tall, and this thing was at least as tall, if not taller, than the trees that surrounded it. It started taking steps parallel to my position and was covering ground quickly with ease. Its stride was slow and relaxed, yet it moved with incredible speed. That led me to believe that this creature was gigantic. It very quickly traversed the landscape, and I lost sight of it along a neighboring spur. I did not believe what I saw initially, assuming I had imagined it. I never had seen anything like that in my life. I didn't tell many people about it while I was in, and even when I got out. I kept it to myself, thinking there was no way I saw what I saw. But then, in 2010, I listened to the story on Coast to Coast, specifically the story about the giant of Kandahar. That made all the memories of my time in service come flooding back and made me consider other things I saw during my deployment. For instance, the creature was described as having fire orange hair, and it reminded me of a tradition the locals in the area of my sighting would do. They would dye their hair a bright orange color and even would dye their goats the same color. They never gave any explanation why. It seemed like it was every once in a while they would do this, and then all of a sudden those orange dyed goats would be gone, and the locals' hair would also no longer be dyed orange. I assumed maybe it was a cultural thing I didn't understand, but now it makes me wonder if it was some kind of gesture to the creature Nephilim, or if the goats were sacrificed to it. I'm a Christian, and the Bible briefly discussed the men of renown, aka the Nephilim. I think that's what I saw, a member of an ancient race of giants that descended from fallen angels. Or it could be something like Sasquatch. I'm not sure. That was a story from an anonymous U.S. Army soldier. The next story is called Giants on the Feed, and it's from an anonymous Air Force Reaper operator. It goes, I was a sensor operator on the Reaper, heading up to work a tasking in the northern parts of the country, scanning around, doing my thing, and looking at stuff. There are small villages up high in the central mountains that I scanned probably a dozen times. Found a super small mud hut, which is where I saw the giants. They were 3-ish, maybe even 4 meters tall. There's a ruler tool that tells you how wide your crosshair is, and the people were as tall as the crosshair was wide. The few mud huts were extremely rudimentary, like just a mound with some holes for a door and windows. They didn't do anything crazy, just normal people things, tending fires and other chores. I wish I could say they did something exciting, but really just mobbed around their small clearing. There were a few goats tied up and a fire that one person was tending. Hard to tell details, but they seemed to wear rugged clothing. I would guess similar to Afghan traditional from how they moved, but they seemed heavily cloaked. The only interesting thing was the size. The goats looked like cats next to them. This was all in mid-wave IR at night, so they showed up as black humanoid heat signatures. I wish I could have used our daytime camera. I always wonder if they have red hair, lol. I only monitored them for about 10 minutes before they were too far away to see. Okay, I've got 2 more for you. So the next one's called Giant of a Man, and it's from an anonymous U.S. Air Force airman. I was an FMV analyst from 2012 to 2018. We were doing pre-op soak northeast of Korengal, getting patterns of life on damn near every warm body. We saw some dudes around a fire, which is completely normal, but watched to see if we could ID any weapons. After about 20 minutes, What we thought were two dudes huddled together under a blanket stood up. I mean, this guy made the rest of the dudes look like children in terms of height. He stood up and walked over to a mud hut that he had to bend way over to get in. We were IR, so I couldn't see if he was red-haired or not, but I just know that he was a big MFer, at least 8 to 9 feet. So, I mean, this is, pretty consistent that they're living in mud huts and that they're really big people. It also seems pretty consistent that they're coming out at night. That's probably to, avoid exposure, I would say. Anyway, here is the last story from the website, and it's from a former member of the Australian Army. It's called The Giant of Uruzgan. It says, I was a lieutenant in the Australian Army at the time and deployed to Uruzgan province. I was on piquet, what you yonks would call security or sentry, in my lab in the early hours one morning and was scanning across the valley with a thermal imager, looking for threats, and saw a large human-like figure that looked different from normal because it didn't have the usual clothes the Afghans would wear. It looked like a person, but lankier. Not much detail through the TI and due to distance. I walked behind a few compounds and I could see it from the chest armpits up. I lased the compound walls to confirm distance a few times because I knew I would get a good return off the walls. I thought it was around 500 to 600 meters away, but when I did a more detailed scan, it was also unusual to see individual people out at that time of night. I realized it was further away, so I used the LRF to get the range and was shocked to see it was 1,800 meters away. It wasn't in any hurry, and I followed it for about 5 minutes before it went out of my FOV. Just looked like it was walking, wasn't in a hurry at all, but was aware of what was happening around it. Kept looking around, especially near the compounds. No idea what it was, but it would have been at least 12 feet tall. I don't know of anyone else who saw anything like it. Never told anyone about it before, but it has stayed with me over all these years. So we're getting pretty consistent stories. I mean, these 4 or 5 stories were all basically the same. I would say you have the difference, like the giant of Kandahar, which was out in daylight. So I think that's probably an anomaly. It's probably not normally out during daylight, and they're probably scared to be out during daylight. But these were all in the Afghani mountains. So I'm wondering, if the folklore isn't actually folklore, or if it's a little bit of truth. I think every folklore is it's rooted in some truth. So I don't know. Are giants real? This is not the first conspiracy about giants that I've heard. I haven't done a lot of episodes about it, but I saw something, maybe it was in Hawaii, of giant bones. They found these giant bones, and they're bigger than what these giants are explained to be. But who knows? I mean, is it true? Is it false? That's up to you to decide. But until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.